Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going over the pros and cons of audiobooks, of Kindle books or ebooks, and regular old books. And we're going to talk about where they can all fit into your life. Now, if you are unaware, there is some debate and discussion, sometimes civilized, sometimes not, as to the legitimacy of ebooks and audiobooks. Some people believe that they do not count as reading. They think that unless you are reading a real physical book, it does not count as consuming that book. I think that is crazy talk, and I'm going to go over books, ebooks, and audiobooks today. We're going to talk about their pros and cons, and how there's no reason why you shouldn't have all three of them in your life at the same time, because they all fill different niche roles. And let's start this with the ebook. So we'll start with the pros. Now, there is one very straightforward and simple pro to having an ebook, or having an ebook reader. And that is that you can fit a lot of books in such a small package. So if you are somebody that does a lot of traveling, whether it be cross-country or overseas on planes, especially on planes, especially where you have to worry about luggage weight, Kindles can be an absolute godsend, because they are relatively small, they weigh relatively nothing, and you can have 100,000 books. You've got millions of books at your disposal with a Kindle. Secondly, they are so much more durable than a regular book. I've had this Kindle since 2012, and full disclosure, when I got it, I actually hated it. When I first got it, I was living in a house, I had, my regular library, and I was in the army at the time, and I thought I'd be able to take this outfield with me and read books with me while I was outfield. And in all honesty, it worked pretty well at that. The only issue I had was that I didn't really enjoy reading off the screen. So I stopped using it altogether. And it wasn't until 8 years into the future that I pulled it out of storage and I started using it again, because I was beginning to travel Canada. So it's worth pointing out that this has lasted for 9 years of me not treating it very well at all. So it has been incredibly durable. I've been very impressed by how much punishment and just not love it's been able to take, and it still works pretty well. So the durability is something worth keeping in mind. But what I think is one of the biggest advantages for the Kindle over, say, paperback books or audiobooks is something that people don't really talk about, and that is that you can get books for half the price, right? Like, there are a lot of books that in the real world would cost me about $20, if not a little bit more, but on Kindle I can find them for $4 to maybe $10. And right now, while no one's working and this whole pandemic is going on, half-price books is a pretty damn good deal. And lastly, there is the instant access to books. So if you're like me and you watch other booktubing channels and people talk about books, or they talk about their TBRs, or they give a review, and then you suddenly decide that you want to read one of these books that you've just seen, you can instantly download the book on your Kindle and start reading it, regardless of where you are in the world, regardless of what time it is. But if you try to buy a real book, you either have to order it online and wait, a week or whatever for that book to get to you, or go to a bookstore. But if it's after, say, 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever, that bookstore is going to be closed. So you're going to have to wait till the next day. So if you're like someone like me and you are incredibly impulsive, something like having a Kindle where you can just immediately download a book, really helpful. But now let's go into the cons of reading on a Kindle. Now, this is something that I feel as if doesn't get as much attention as it should, but I find when I read a Kindle, if I'm really giving it a lot of attention and I'm really trying to put pages behind me and spend hours reading a book, I will get a really bad headache. Not on the first day, but after maybe 1 or 2 days of reading the Kindle and really intensely reading it, I will have a really bad headache for the next 2 days after I stop reading. And it's really simple as to why that is. It's because at the end of the day, a Kindle is still a screen. And unlike your mobile phone or your TV, where you can just vacantly, half-heartedly look at the screen and it doesn't really have that much of a negative effect on you. When you're reading a book on your Kindle, you have to really be focusing on that screen, and you have to really be taking in everything that's written there, so you're really intensely focusing on it. And if you were to do that to your TV or your phone, or if you've ever worked like an admin job where you have to really intensely focus on your computer screen, you'll know what I'm talking about, where you get the headache. And I feel as if that's not really talked about enough when you consider the cons of having a Kindle. But if you're just a regular reader, then that's fine. That shouldn't really be a massive drama for you. It's more so if you're putting in like hours at a time over a couple of days. Besides from that, the other cons that I have really aren't that big of a deal. There's the battery. I find that my battery is 9 years old and it still holds charge pretty damn well, except for in extreme heat or extreme cold. Then the battery does not last very long at all. And just talking about an aesthetic, you can't really keep and display your books the same way you can with real books, you know? So if you're somebody that likes to read the books and then display them, you know, your little hunting trophies that you finished reading, that's what I like to do. You can't really do that on your Kindle. So basically, to sum up, the Kindle is all about traveling. If you are a traveler, the Kindle is your best friend. It cuts down the weight of books, cuts down the cost of books, especially if you're like backpacking on, you know, a tight budget. The cost of books being half price is really handy. So definitely there is always a space for Kindles in a traveler's suitcase. All right, so now that we've talked about the Kindle, let's talk about a real good old-fashioned physical book. I don't think that these need any introduction. They've been around for a long, long time. And let's jump straight into the pros. So pro number one is the smell. I don't think anyone will deny the fact that books smell fantastic. Next is the feel. There's just something so much more engaging about being able to hold a book and see the pages that you've read, see the pages that you have to go. The books are also displayable. Like I said in the cons for the Kindle, having all these books is like a nice little hunting trophy. You can display all the ones that you've read. But the biggest pro that I would say that a regular book has over a Kindle is that if you're someone like me and you're over the age of, say, 25, you would be a lot more used to doing bulk reading on paper than on a computer screen, right? Because when we were kids and we were at school, all of our work had to be handwritten and everything that you read was all read on paper. So your brain and your eyes are a lot more accustomed to doing bulk reading on paper as opposed to doing it on a computer screen. So if you're someone a little older like myself, that's something worth noting about regular books. Now, what are the cons? Firstly, they're easily damaged. Real books are so easily damaged that if you are someone that likes to display them, you may be reluctant to leave your house with them at all. They're also not easy to travel with as they are quite heavy. I just flew from Australia to Canada with all 8 of the Witcher books. Took up about a quarter of my suitcase and added like an extra kilo to my luggage. So real books are not easy to travel with. But finally, and the most important point is real books are a lot more expensive than an ebook. And I've said this plenty of times, I have no idea why books are expensive as they are, because if you buy a $20 book, the author that wrote that really only makes about $1, which is crazy. So finally, what is the takeaway for real books? Real books are fantastic. Real books are like decoration. Real books are for people that like to brag about all the books that they've read, or they just like the colors and they like a fully stocked bookshelf with all the colors. And personally, I like to do something like I like to have a playing card inside of my books. I like to have some little marker that displays each book that I've read. That's just an ego thing. And then my bookshelf will be stocked with books with all the pretty colors and all the pretty books, and all of the little playing cards there will have like a little marker that'll tell me which books I've read and which books are still needing to be read. So if you're someone that is settled down, real books are a great device for you. And now finally, let's get on to audiobooks. Now, audiobooks is something that I found the most difficult to get into when it came to books, ebooks, and audiobooks. Audiobooks was the hardest for me to get into because I feel as if you really need to find a narrator that you can connect with their storytelling style or they can connect with their voice. And if you're looking for a recommendation, the best one that I've found so far was Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. It was a great story, and the woman that narrated it was really, really good. The Poppy War was also a good one. I wasn't a huge fan of that story, but the woman that narrated it was really good. So if that's something that's been on your radar, it might be worth checking out the audiobook for it. Those are just a couple of examples that I found really helped me get into audiobooks. But let's get onto it with what are the pros of audiobooks. Firstly, you can do it anywhere, anytime, doing anything. For example, cleaning your house, doing your dishes, going out for a drive, on a hike, on a run. I personally was never a huge fan of audiobooks until I had to do a drive. I had to do about 4 days worth of 6-hour drives, and I got really tired of my music very quickly. And that's when I first tried Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, and I fell in love. Now I can listen to audiobooks. I really enjoy them. Ready Player One is also meant to be a really good audiobook. I just finished that and enjoyed it. People love Will Wheaton's voice. I was like, whatever, but that's another one worth checking out. Next is the price. You can really find some good, cheap audiobooks. And if you get there's membership services, I'm just going to use Audible as an example. You get one free book each month, plus all audiobooks are half price or something along those lines. But you can also find free audiobooks on YouTube. If there's a book you're interested in, put in the book's name and put in audiobook afterwards, and you'd be surprised how many free audiobooks of big names like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. You'd be surprised how many are on YouTube for free. So that's also something worth looking into. But I think one of the biggest parts about audiobooks, or the biggest pros of audiobooks, is that they are available to people that can't read, or that struggle to find enjoyment from reading because of something as simple as dyslexia, but maybe they have no hands. There's a whole host of reasons why someone might struggle to read a real book, and an audiobook will help to fill in those gaps. So what are the cons of an audiobook? The voice of the narrator and the way that they speak. You really have to vibe well with the way that the narrator speaks, otherwise it can take a story that is a great story and you will just not enjoy it at all because of the way that the person speaks, their inflections, the tone of voice, whatever. For example, I just read Shadow and Bone, and I looked at the reviews for the audiobook for Shadow and Bone, and a lot of people had the same complaint that the characters sounded too British, even though it's a book set in a Russia world. So that's just an example of that. But the real main con for audiobooks is that you cannot connect to the story in the same way that you can connect to the story if you're reading it, because the story is being filtered through someone else telling it to you. So you cannot connect and feel as deeply as you would if you were reading the story yourself. And that is a really big con if your story hinges on you being emotionally attached to the characters. The last con I want to touch on is you might not be able to focus as well as on the task that you're doing. For example, driving. You don't want to be driving down the road and being distracted by your audiobook, but that's something that you have to be mindful of yourself. And so to sum it up, audiobooks are great for people that don't have a lot of free time. If you're always cooking dinner, doing chores around the house, you're doing lots of long drives, maybe you're a courier or a truck driver or something. Anytime you listen to music, you could be listening to an audiobook. Anyways, guys, that's all I got for you today. If you're new to the channel, I'm all about books, whether it be reading them, writing them, or reviewing them. So please subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave a comment down below, and as always, thank you very much.